Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing one of the most underrated move updates from the Season 27 balance patch, and that is the big buff to Hisuian Electrode. Hisuian Electrode's grass electric typing long promised that it would be a cool meta corebreaker, being able to handle ground types and flyers simultaneously, but unfortunately the moveset was a bit of a letdown. However, with the big buff to Energy Ball now getting a lot cheaper, Electrode can spam out Energy Ball or Wild Charge every 10 turns. I paired up Electrode with Kingdra and Mantine and ended up going on a 10-game win streak in the Open Great League. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and we get the dream lead in game number 1, Hisuian Electrode into Shadow Quagsire. My opponent's going to pivot out, safe switching into Licky. I don't have a hard check to Licky on this team. I could have put my own Licky on the team over Kingdra, but I felt that Kingdra would probably be a more fun option. My opponent overfarms massively, predicting that I would catch out, but I'm very okay just to stay in, land a Wild Charge, and then send in Mantine. Sending Mantine into a rollout user might seem a little counterintuitive, but Mantine is just so incredibly bulky that I'm more than happy to absorb the hits on the Mantine, and I still have quite a bit of energy stored on the Electrode for later. My opponent sends in a Volt Switch Fortress as their final Pokemon. My Mantine is going to get farmed out very quickly here, but I should still be in a very okay spot. This team by design is pretty weak to Fortress, especially Bug Bite Fortress, but I was mainly relying on the fact that with so many Kanto Ninetales out there probably wouldn't be a lot of Fortress gameplay. Unfortunately, we are seeing one in game 1, but I still should just be in a completely winning position. My opponent does decide to shield up the Surf. I'm going to be shielding back because I would actually get knocked out here by the Rock Tomb. They bait with the Sand Tomb, they pivot into the Quagsire, and I can send in Electrode. Electrode's going to be winning charge attack priority by a massive amount over the Quagsire. They fire off the Aqua Tail, that does absolutely nothing, and now I can throw 4 and CMP tie Energy Ball to Aqua Tail number 2. This is double super effective. Quagsire gets one shot, and now my opponent is just in a very awkward position. They fire off energy with Licky, but I still have charge attack loaded on the Kingdra for later, so I can shield, fire off the Wild Charge. That's going to be the end of Licky, and when they bring in the Fortress, I can throw one Thundershock to ensure their mid-volt switch and get the combo play with the Surf. I think the coverage on Hisuian Electrode is extremely intriguing, because if you have a resistance to electric, you're probably taking super effective from Energy Ball, so its energy is almost always valuable. We move to game number 2, going up against a very bulky Pokemon in Galarian Corsola. I'm just going to overfarm massively here and wait for my opponent to fire off the Nightshade. Nightshade I can very comfortably survive, and then I can look to win the Zero Protect Shield scenario by firing off the back-to-back Wild Charges. That's how strong of a move Wild Charge is. Even with Corsola being so bulky, I'm guaranteed to win Switch Advantage or Shield Advantage. If my opponent puts up the Shield, I'm going to get aggressive and pivot into Kingdra. I'm a little bit worried they could have a Tinkaton to answer my Kingdra, but even if that's the case, Surf will still do some pretty nice damage. Well, it is a fairy type, but it's not the fairy type I was expecting. My opponent's going to be sending in Togekiss. This is a lot better of a matchup for Kingdra than going up against Tinkaton, because Togekiss can only hit for neutral damage. I would survive an Aura Sphere, but I'm expecting that my Kingdra will have quite a bit of value later on, so I put up the shield, and I will go for the Swift bait. Swift would come pretty close to knocking out, and now I can save the Kingdra and send in Mantine. Mantine is on the team to be a hard answer to Kanto Ninetales, but it's also here to be the bulk of the team. They're going to get to fire off Psyshock after Psyshock, and Mantine just simply will not care. Mantine is going to get the full Wing Attack farm down, and now I just have to watch for a potential catch. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon in the back. It's going to be Gastrodon, and Mantine is in such a strong position. Water Pulse lands, I fire off the Twister, and I'm expecting my opponent is now going to pivot into the Corsola, so I'm going to pivot into the Kingdra. There's a simultaneous switch, Kingdra into Corsola. I cannot get the farm down, so I'm going to be forced to fire off the Surf. Surf will be taking the knockout onto the Corsola. Back in comes the Gastrodon. It's going to be a race to the charge move, but Kingdra wins charge attack priority. Gastrodon's Body Slam is denied. Down goes Gastrodon, and that's a good game. We move to the next match, sending Hisuian Electrode into Seismitoad. This is a dominant lead win. Electrode paces identically, but Electrode is always going to be winning charge attack priority. So my opponent is in a no-win situation. They're either going to have to get one shot or eventually catch out of this matchup. And if they catch out, then I have a second strong answer to Seismitoad in the back with the Mantine. Seismitoad is a Pokemon that I think is very strong, so when it comes to team building, I really like team building strong into it. My opponent catches the Energy Ball onto Lopunny. Lopunny is a very spicy pick. I'm going to rebank the Energy Ball and then just send in the Kingdra. Kingdra should be able to tank whatever they throw here. I assume it's going to be some kind of a Shadow Ball, or in this case, a Triple Axle. and I really don't want to take whatever boosted move they're about to throw, so as soon as I get the Surf, I'm going to be firing it. Surf lands, down goes Lopunny, back in comes the Seismitoad. Seismitoad going to overfarm quite substantially, and that's going to let me make a Surf. Surf won't knock out here, but it will put them pretty low. They're going to try and exit with energy, but I'm pretty okay absorbing this energy on the Mantine. Mantine is here to be the damage sponge. I'm trusting in the fact that Electrode energy is almost always good, and it's just going to be a win. It's Fearow in the back. Look at this coverage. Electrode is so sick. We shield up the Drill Peck, build up to the back-to-back wild charges. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We pick up a pretty negative lead in the next match. Hisuian Electrode into Como-O. I safe switch into Kingdra. Opponent sends out Carbink, but thanks to the new move Surf on Kingdra, this matchup is actually pretty good. Look at how much damage Surf does to the Carbink. Carbink is very, very slow. It relies on just winning off of its typing. So having really good pacing and super effective coverage on the Kingdra means that Kingdra is actually a rare dragon that can fight back against the Scourge that is Carbink. I build up to the back-to-back Surfs. They're going to be no shielding and bringing back in Como-O. Como-O would love to get a farm down here. I do have a very high rank Kingdra. I need to live the next Dragon Tail, and I do. I'm able to leave with a parting gift of one final Swift. This will put a pretty nice amount of damage onto the Como-O, and now I can bring the Mantine. They're always going to go for Clangy Scales into a switch, so I'm going to blind switch into Electrode, and their final Pokemon is revealed to be Grumpig. This endgame situation does look a little bit rough. I think I have to try and call a Dynamic Punch bait. So I know Shield, it's the Dynamic Punch, and now I can double up on Wild Charges. This is going to be very, very close. Can I survive to make Wild Charge number 2? Yes, I can. The Psywave did not take the knockout, and we're going to get to land both of our charge attacks. That's going to put the Grumpig very, very low, and all I need to win the game is to ensure that I have at least one wing attack of residual energy, because the Como-O is still 3 off. So I throw one wing attack, Twister will be knocking out the Grumpig, and then I can always outpace the Como-O and win the game. Because the Como-O was healthy enough that it would survive the wing attacks, but they're definitely not surviving this. We make it to the Twister. Twister KOs the Como-O, and even with really rough alignment in that game, we're able to fight our way back and get the win. We move to the next match, to the Hisuian Electrode into Licky Licky. Licky Licky throws on alignment, assuming I would never catch on alignment, and they are correct. I would never catch on alignment, and they're able to land the hard-hitting Shadow Ball. I'm able to farm up to the back-to-back wild charges. Now I have to decide, are they going to throw on alignment, or will they go for good timing? I decided to go for good timing. They end up throwing on alignment, so I will have to go down a shield. I definitely should have just CMP-tied there. I'm now going to pivot out, save the energy, bring in Kingdra. I can't quite get the farm down, so I will have to take a body slam for my trouble. But at the very least, the Licky Licky has basically been removed from the field of play. In comes Shadow Primeape. Shadow Primeape is a Pokemon I really want to see with this team because I have Mantine, which is going to absolutely destroy it. I try and make the Swift. I'm unable to get there. Primeape goes for the Shadow Rage Fist, but the high-ranked Kingdra hangs on, and I'm able to make Swift number 2. I actually rebuilt a second Kingdra to have a better IV, and it keeps paying off. It seems like having a good Kingdra is a really, really nice thing to have in this current Open Great League meta. They fire off the boosted Rage Fist. I'm going to throw the Twister. I do not want them to get to a second boosted Rage Fist here, so Twister will easily be knocking out that Shadow Primeape, and in the back, they have Fearow, and this game is just over. I have so much energy stored on the Electrode. I'm pretty close to back-to-back wild charges. I could switch in, but I'm just going to stay in, force their energy, and then I can just build up to the back-to-back with the Electrode. The Licky Licky is on 1 HP, and it's completely dry, so I bring in the Electrode. They try and catch on to the Licky Licky, and the Electrode energy is just undeniable. It goes absolutely everywhere, and my opponent will resign the match. Another matchup where Electrode is absolutely incredible is against Tinkaton. Tinkaton's Gigaton Hammer is resisted due to that electric subtyping. They can throw neutral bulldozes, but that's really going to be doing no damage. I can now farm up to the back-to-back wild charges, easily knock out the Tinkaton, and in general just make life very uncomfortable for them. If they shield, they're never going to be able to farm me down, so I just CMP tie them here, and wild charge will secure the KO. In comes Annihilate, but I have a very strong answer to Annihilate. I now get to send in Mantine. These wing attacks do add up quite a bit. I'm never going to be shielding the first, because again, Mantine is on the team to take hits and to beat fire types. I'm going to farm up, fire off the Twister right before they're able to get there. These boosted counters are adding up quite a bit. Shadow Annihilate, always an incredibly scary Pokemon. I believe, however, I should just be able to wing attack them down now. They go for yet another Rage Fist. There's the pivot out. It's going to be Furret in the back, and this game should be a win. I launch the Water Pulse to guarantee some nice chip damage, and then I get to send in the Kingdra. As for Kingdra, I'm just going to double up on Swifts, and then the game is over. they're going to go for a Brick Break, ramping up the amount of Sucker Punch damage that they're able to do. But the moment I've doubled up, this game is over because my opponent just doesn't have a way of getting rid of the Mantine. They will be able to get through the Kingdra, but the Mantine's just going to be able to farm them down after. They realize it, and they will concede the match. We get a great lead in the next match. Hisuian Electrode into Seismitoad once again. Seismitoad is a Pokemon that I am ensuring this season that I am not running weak to. I have been swept by Seismitoad too many times, so especially with a team like this, I want to try and run ABA Strong to it. Here I actually get the Energy Ball debuff, which is quite nice. That means my Energy Ball will still be at full power. My opponent catches the Energy Ball onto Typhlosion, but I have a very strong answer to Typhlosion in the back. I can throw one Thunder Shock, send in the Kingdra, and I've set it up perfectly to where I can tank the Thunder Punch and fully farm down before they make Thunder Punch number 2. This is just going to put my opponent in such an incredibly awkward position. They do have an Icy Wind loaded on the Seismitoad, but they don't want to take the damage there, so they bring in Mantine. But now I can just spam out Swift after Swift after Swift, making it more and more uncomfortable. Mantine can take the hits, but this is just a war of attrition that my opponent is going to end up losing. Because even though they've taken all the hits on the Mantine, I have my own Mantine, and they're just simply never going to be able to beat it. They can't even get the farm down here. They're forced to throw a Twister. I can bring in my Mantine, and even with having an Icy Wind loaded, there's just nothing Seismitoad can do here. I don't really have a lot of energy on the Electrode, but I'm not going to need the Electrode. Mantine will close out this game. Twister lands, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We move to the next game, leading Hisuian Electrode into Shadow Pidgeot. I haven't played out this matchup before, and the neutral gusts do quite a lot of damage. I don't want to debuff my defense just yet, so I will fire off an Energy Ball bait. Energy Ball does get the shield, which is quite nice. I'm probably going to end up shielding Air Cutters here, but that's okay. But my opponent full sends a Brave Bird, and then they're going to be save switching into Florges. I'm suddenly very happy that I put up the shield there. I feel like every time I shield against the Pidgeot, it's always the bait. So the fact that I was actually able to shield a nuke there was a very rare occurrence. I did have a little bit of game lag there as I tried to pivot out. I still end up catching the Chilling Water, which is really, really nice for me. But ideally, I would have wanted to switch out of that Electrode sooner. They go for the Trailblaze, but in doing so, I'm only one stage debuffed instead of 2, and I get a full farm down. If they bring back in the Pidgeot is really not going to appreciate the damage from Mantine. Mantine doesn't have a high attack stat, but Shadow Pidgeot is very frail. Pidgeot will put up the shield. I'm going to fire off the Water Pulse now. And then I'm going to try and pivot into Electrode and snipe them down with Thunder Shocks. There's the pivot. Electrode snipes down. What do they have in the back? It's a Mud Boy. Hello, Gastrodon. And this Electrode is just taking over. One hit KO. Down goes Gastrodon. And the team just keeps on winning. We get a slightly negative lead in the next match, Hisuian Electrode into Kingdra. Kingdra should be able to neutrally win this matchup. However, I can just fire off the Wild Charge, guarantee big damage or a shield advantage, and then pivot into the mirror. They're going to save their energy, send out Corviknight, but a Kingdra up energy actually does very okay here. I was worried before the season. I knew the potential of Kingdra, but I was scared that it just would not have enough bulk to compete in the Open Great League. But as it turns out, it has just enough bulk to hang on in a lot of situations. And Kingdra has been one of the most fun Pokemon for me to run this season. It's been in quite a few videos, and that's been for good reason. This Pokemon is powerful. I'm able to save a Swift on the Kingdra, pivot into the Mantine, and Mantine is very okay taking paybacks. My opponent baits with the Air Cutter, fishing for a boost, but they do not get it, and now I'm able to make the Twister. I don't even know if this will knock out, but my opponent clearly thought so as they did put up the shield. I'm not quite sure on the damage ranges in a Mantine Corviknight matchup. There's the payback at long last. I'm expecting they probably go for the catch here, and they do. They send in Kingdra. Very nice CMP sack swap. But unfortunately for them, Mantine is too bulky. Mantine survives the Swift. I get to take the knockout onto the Kingdra, and I still feel like I'm in a pretty okay position. They can't really afford to bring back in the Corviknight here. They're going to bring in their final Pokemon, which is Kanto Ninetales. And unfortunately for them, my backline is just so strong into the Ninetales. Surf connects. That is devastating damage. I think I always put up the shield here on the Energy Ball just to force energy out of the Corviknight. They're just going to stay in, let me farm down. They've given up. They realize there's no win con, and they will concede the match. And now for the final match, I'm going to be showcasing one of the first games with the team. This is a game that I lost before beginning that 10-game win streak. Predictably, it's one of the Pokemon I did not want to see, which is the Shadow Bug-Bite Fortress. I'm able to grab a shield with Wild Charge and pivot into Kingdra, but I still took a ton of damage on the Electrode to do so. They're going to Rock Tomb. I'm going to fire off the Surf, and my opponent gets a catch onto Carbink. So unfortunately, we're going up against some serious degen from the opponent. Even with the debuff applied onto the Kingdra, Kingdra is just so fast. I think I can actually hang on and make it to a third Surf. And I would really, really love if my opponent put up the shield. That would be terrific. It would be better for them if they ended up letting it go. I hope they put up the shield, but they do not. They're just going to fully sacrifice it. In comes the Fortress. I can't really afford to concede the farm down, so I get aggressive and pivot into the Mantine. They fire off the Rock Tomb, applying the debuff, and in comes Shadow for Alligator. So technically, Mantine does have a pretty good matchup here, but I'm already one stage debuffed from my attack. Twister, not going to do a whole lot. My opponent's going to be able to hit for big damage with the Ice Beam, and this is going to be a very difficult game to win. I'm very low on the Mantine, but I do see a win condition. If I can undercharge and put them in one Thundershock range, then I think I can actually make a wild charge into the Fortress, but they live the Thundershock on 1 HP. So close to finding the win condition, but unfortunately, it was not meant to be. If I'm able to snipe down with the Thundershock, I think I can survive the Bug Bites to make the Wild Charge, and then Wild Charge pressures the shield, and then I'm only 2 off of the Water Pulse, and I should live the Bug Bites on Mantine. So even despite a pretty hard counter game, I still think there were win conditions in that match. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get the Undercharge right. I needed to hit maybe one more bubble, and we could have been okay. All in all, this team was a ton of fun. This is definitely more of an anti-meta style Open Grade League team, but I feel like winning 10 games in a row just doesn't happen by accident. The coverage of Hisuian Electrode feels so incredibly strong. There's very few meta matchups in which Electrode is completely walled, and I think that leads to quite a bit of flexible play. My main goal when team building was I know how strong Kanto Ninetales is, so I wanted to have 2 Pokemon in the back that would give absolutely no play to Kanto Ninetales, and that's where the Kingdra and Mantine came in. Both Kingdra and Mantine are very strong anti-fires, but they're also very strong anti-dragons. So if you run into something like a Kanto Ninetales or a Rogue Como-O like I ran into, then you should actually be in a pretty decent spot. I didn't end up seeing any Altaria leads, but the game plan would probably be to just Wild Charge and then send in the Kingdra, because Wild Charge would inflict some pretty significant neutral damage onto the Altaria, and kind of trust in the fact that almost every Altaria team is going to be weak to a Mantine closer, because Mantine is shockingly very okay into Empoleon, despite the fact that it feels like Empoleon should dominate that matchup. I guess that's just the stat product difference, but Hisuian Electrode, man, I was really impressed with the Hisuian Electrode. I would say compared to some of the other mons that I've used, I liked Electrode more than Jumpluff, which is crazy. Jumpluff is definitely strong, but I felt that Jumpluff was very RPS. Where Jumpluff, if it ended up on a Steel type, you kind of just auto-lost the game. Whereas I felt like Electrode, even though it's not as strong in terms of power level, it felt substantially more flexible, and therefore, to me, it felt like the better pick to use for the Open Grade League. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.